overwhelming experience. If you've ever had to catch a swarm before, you have thousands of bees and you're putting them into a box, and you're also trying to make the homeowner not be afraid all at the same time. So within the last, it was 2012 we started doing the swarm catching. Since then we've caught almost 60 swarms in the last 4 years. So she also said we do cutouts. I don't know, we probably do about 10 to 15 per year on the cutouts. So let's get this started. What I'm going to talk about is swarms. The most important thing though is that we need to understand why they swarm. And I know that this is going to be, boring for a lot of you. We kind of know it. But until you start from the beginning to understand the process of it, it'll help you out. So why do bees swarm? They swarm for reproduction purposes, especially your overwintered hives. They're going to swarm in May. So what we also have found out is that if you have a hive that is continuously swarming several times per year, you most likely have more of a feral genetic. So a lot of people will say, oh, I only had one swarm, whereas some people will say I have 3 or 4. You're probably looking at more feral genetics in your bee line than like the Italians or Russians that you would have. Another sign to watch for is that you will have your chimney effect with a lot of the bees that want to swarm quickly. They won't be filling out all of your frames. They're going to be trying to move up, and then after that they feel crowded and then they move on. So also what they want to do is they want to increase their population and they want to reduce overcrowding. When all of the bees come into the brood chamber, they like to cluster around the queen, and so if they don't have enough space, they're going to say, we don't have enough room and we need to move to somewhere else. The thing that is very important to know is if you have a hive, make it through the year, over winter, when you come into the spring, your hive is going to want to reproduce. If it doesn't reproduce, you might not have healthy bees. So it's actually a good thing that your hive does want to swarm. That's a sign that yes, your bees are going well and they're very strong. Swarm season here in Ohio begins about the 1st to 2nd week of May. This year we might be a little bit earlier because the weather has been very, very nice. So what you want to do is you actually want to split your hive before your hive gets ready to swarm. Also, there are 2 different types of swarms. There are the early swarms that happen in May. Those are called your reproductive swarms. And then later in the year, you're going to have your overcrowding swarms, where either the beekeeper is not keeping up with their bees, and the bees decide that they don't have enough room, so they're going to go ahead and leave. Has anyone ever seen a swarm in action? Yeah. It's pretty cool. If you can't ever, the noise, it's like a roar that you would never ever mistake for anything else. I will be upstairs in my house doing something, and you can hear it from half a yard away. My bees are swarming, you better go outside and chase them. So typically I don't have that happen. But this is a picture of a swarm. You're looking at probably 10 to 15,000 different bees flying, and what they're doing is when they leave the hive, they're following the queen. Usually when she comes out of her hive, she's going to land in the closest tree or area that's going to be directly out of their hive. So if this is your hive right here, she's probably going to go straight out into whatever is the quickest thing. So if there is a tree here, she's going to land here for them to rest, gather, and then they will move on from there. So that's when you want to catch your bees, when they're still really close to your hive, because you don't want to have to chase them a couple miles or have the neighbors down the street call you and tell you your bees are down there. So the swarm process is pretty simple to understand. 2 weeks before your bees swarm. So if we're looking at the 1st week of May, that would be mid-April. Your bees actually are getting ready to swarm because they want to reproduce. So your bees, your scouts are going to be out and they're going to be looking for their new home before they actually swarm. What they also do is they reduce the feeding for the queen so that the queen downsizes in size so that she's able to fly better and to go to their new location. So this is several stages. I'm talking about days, so it takes just pay attention from day 1, and we're going to get down to a few more days in the next slide. Day 1, you're going to assume your bees have decided today that they want to swarm. So day 1, they have decided that they're swarming. What they're going to do is they're going to start creating the queen cells. They're going to feed those new queen cells royal jelly, extra royal jelly than what the regular larva would get. And then on day 9, your queen swarm or your queen cells are going to be capped. And that's a very important thing to remember. So on day 9, they're going to be capped. Now, I don't know if anyone was here when I did my presentation for the new beekeepers, but I stressed the fact that you should inspect your hives every 10 days through the swarm season. And the reason is because on day 10 to 12, your bees are leaving. It takes 16 days for your queen bee to hatch. Day 1, they decide they're going to go. Day 10 to 12 is when they leave. So you still have 6 more days, if I can count, 4 more days, 4 to 6 more days until your queen's hatching. So people see their swarm cells in their hive, and they think that they have some time to get ready, but they don't, because your bees are actually going to leave before the new queens are hatching out. Now, everything is always weather dependent. If it's raining every single day, your bees aren't going to leave. And no, it takes 16 days for the queen to hatch out, which is why you inspect every 10 days. What it is that the bees decide the queen has a pheromone, she releases the pheromone, and she says, I'm going to swarm. If you decide that you're going to get in your hive and try to stop that, it's not going to happen. Once the queen has released that pheromone, even if you get in your hive and you crush all your queen cells, they're going to go ahead and create some more because they have already decided that they're swarming. The only thing that you can do to stop that is to split your hive. So here we are to day 15 or 16. 15, I say that because I have a lot of sparrow bees. You would refer, and my bees tend to hatch a day before the regular 16. So you could have 15 or 16, so that means you should be watching what your queens are doing if they're about to hatch. But yes, 15 or 16, your new queen is going to hatch. And when she hatches, the first queen comes out. She's typically the strongest, or whoever is the strongest, they fight to the death. So once they have established who the queen is, if any other virgin queens hatch out therefore after, you may have virgin swarms where the virgin queen runs out and takes a portion of the bees with them. We had a situation before, a couple years ago, where it was a regular swarm. I went out, cut the bees out of the tree, stuck them in a box, but half the bees kept returning back. And I'll explain the process here in a little bit, but if that continues to happen, that meant that there was something else going on. I found out that it was a virgin queen swarm and it had 2 queens in it. So I actually ended up having to split that one swarm in half because I actually had 2 different queens. It's not very common, but when they do throw the queens after, then it can happen that you have multiple queens coming out. So day 22 to 25, your queen hatched, and now day 22 to 25, she's going to go out and she's going to mate. So day 28 and on, it's not guaranteed, but she's going to return and she's going to start laying her eggs. Well, she's not actually going to return on 28. She's going to be out mating between 22 and 25 days. And then around 28 days on is when she's going to start laying. If you're lucky, 3 days, but typically it's up to a week. So if you think about that, that means that on day 10 the bees swarmed. So you have 2.5 weeks now with no eggs in your hive. And then once the new queen starts laying, 21 more days for your workers to hatch. So right there you have about 6 weeks with no bees being hatched out. So what they call this, if anyone's ever heard of the term, it's called breaking the brood cycle. Breaking the brood cycle is a way to treat varroa in a sense, because basically you're not having any cap cells for the varroa to sit in for long periods of time, so this can reduce varroa. That's also what I've read, is that the feral genetics, because they swarm more often, they're not as prone to varroa because they're continuously breaking the brood cycle several different times. Does anyone have any questions up until now? Did we follow the day thing? Just want to make sure. So what do you do with those queen cells? If you have accidentally neglected your bees, or you're kind of overwhelmed with everything that's going on, you open up your hive and you see all these queen cells in there, should you smash them? Well, there's 2 different scenarios. If you still have a queen and you see her in there, then your bees still want to swarm. So your bees will build them again if you kill those queen cells. So your solution is to split your bees. A lot of people are going to be finding this out here in May when we're getting close to the swarm season. Your bees are going to be building up. Before your bees get ready to swarm, you should be ahead of the game and split them, and that way you'll have 2 hives instead of 1 and then a swarm that takes off. But the thing is that once they've already created the queen cells, the pheromone is in the hive, that means that they're ready to swarm, so you have to pull that original queen out of that hive. So she is the one that needs to be pulled out and put into a new hive so so that she thinks that she's swarmed. If you can't find a queen, chances are that they've already swarmed. So if you smash those queen cells, your queen is going to die. And now you have no queen and you have to buy one. So for me, and every beekeeper is different, absolutely do not smash your queen cells until you know where your queen is. And if they are already ready to swarm, then you should be splitting them so you can have 2 hives. The one thing that you can do is if it's after they've created the swarm cells, you can minimize the amount of the cells to reduce the virgin queens swarming thereafter. Because sometimes the hive will create 20 to 30 different cells. You could take it down to 5 or 6 if you feel comfortable doing so. So overcrowding swarms, I talked about the reproductive swarms, those happen in May. We also have the overcrowding swarms, and those are usually starting around the end of June, July, August, and sometimes even into September. Basically, they don't have enough room, so they have decided that they have to find a new location. As a beekeeper, you can counteract that. You can get involved. You can do different things that will stop your bees from feeling overcrowded as long as you are inspecting your hive on a regular basis. So one thing is that if you look, there are signs and symptoms before your bees get ready to swarm. So when you're doing your inspections, if you're looking at your frames and they're putting nectar into your brood chamber, that means that they don't have enough room for their supers. So you need to add super space. If they're putting pollen and honey into the brood, then you need more frames. So what you would do is you could space out a couple of the frames, put some empty frames in between, and then the bees will have something else to do to keep them busy and not feeling overcrowded. Did I put late year swarms twice? Apparently I did. So proper hive management is what you can use. There is a thing called checkerboarding. You have to actually be ahead of the game though on that one. You should be putting your checkerboard super on top about 2 weeks before swarm season. I believe it also coincides with apple blooms. And then also keeping enough ventilation. If the bees have a top entrance to use, they're not going to keep coming into the brood chamber and overcrowding it. And also a slatted rack will give them somewhere to cluster that isn't going to be directly in the brood chamber as well. So why don't you want your bees to swarm? I've met several people that think that they want to help bees reproduce, and so they just want to get a hive, stick it in their backyard, and let the bees do what they want. The thing that is really bad about that is that, one, you just spent, what, $100 to $200 on your bees, depending on if you bought a package or a nuke. You bought the equipment for your bees, so you're in the hole good $300 to $400, and then there goes your bees. So it's not something that you really want to do. If you don't want that many hives, split them, sell them, get your money back. Get $150 by selling a nuke yourself. Always get inspected by the county though before you do that. The other thing is that swarms scare people. I have been called to several different swarms and we've already been sprayed. And it is pretty sad to watch bees die. There have been a couple that we took home to kind of monitor and just see what the reaction is, what happens. Bees get very angry and very mean when they are sprayed. Believe it or not, if they're going to die, they're not very happy about it. So what happens is someone will give us a call, we'll come out and we'll say, did you spray the bees? And they'll say, no, but then you see the can of Raid on the floor. And the bees are very aggressive and very unhappy. And so we tell them, had you called us before you sprayed, we could have just cut the swarm off the branch, stuck it in a box, and walked away. But now you have about 15,000 very angry bees. And so everyone around us is kind of in danger and has to be cautious because they're probably going to be aggressive in some nature. Like I said, people kill them. People are afraid. If you see 10 to 15,000 bees on your house, on your car, on your bike, they're scared. I mean, that's a scary thing. Not everybody really thinks that bees are cool, and that's kind of, for special people like us. So, also knowing that people have to pay for cutouts. I don't do 8 to 12 hours of labor for free personally, and paying a daycare and all the other things that come along with it. So if someone has bees in their house, now they have to pay to get your bees cut out of their house, and that's not something that people want to do. A lot of times they want to ask us, well, how can we kill them? Well, I'm not going to give you tips on how to kill them because now you're going to have honey rotting through your wall. It also gives a bad rep for beekeepers. Here we are trying to say save the bees, bees are great, and instead we're think of as something that's safe and enjoyable if their experience was very negative. Also, there are laws that they want to put out against beekeeping. When I went to the inspector meeting a couple nights ago, they were talking about, I think it was Lakewood, they're trying to get a ban against beekeeping there because bees are scary. There was a gentleman that actually didn't care for his neighbors, so he placed his hive facing the playground of his neighbor's children. I mean, things like that can really cause some negative aspects on beekeepers. So you just want to be cautious and be careful about not creating swarms. And then also, if you don't want multiple hives, like I said, sell your bees and make some of your money back. I mean, some people only want to have 1 or 2 hives. Whatever bees that you go over winter with, so I have 12 bees, or 12 hives, I'm going to have 24 as long as they all make it. If I don't want 24 hives, I can sell them after being inspected to somebody else and get some of my money that's back. So what should you do to prevent swarming? Inspect your hives every 10 days. Split hives before they create your swarm cells. So I told you that the first week of May is probably going to be swarm season this year. So you're going to want to split your bees the week or 2 weeks prior. I would say 2 weeks as long as the weather is good, because that way you don't have to worry about any swarm cells that are being created before you do your inspection. So if you realize that they have created swarm cells, now you have to split your bees. Don't say I can close it up and walk away for a couple days. Once you see those swarm cells being created, you have to act as soon as possible. Also, don't kill your queen cells. If you do see them and you split your hive, don't kill them off. Inspect your bees every 10 days to make sure that you're staying ahead of the game. That's basically in swarm season. I know a lot of you are new beekeepers, so this isn't going to be something that you're probably going to be dealing with, but it does happen. It's usually the overcrowding at the late end of the year where the beekeeper is new, they didn't know how to introduce enough equipment fast enough, or they get overwhelmed and scared, so their bees are going to swarm because they didn't have enough space. Anticipate your reproduction swarming. Split them before they swarm every year, so that's going to be probably the end of April for a lot of us. And also proper hive management. Like I talked about, there are slatted racks. Make sure you have enough ventilation. Things that are making the bees feel that they have enough space to be able to stay confined in their hive. So another thing is that I'll get a call in September for a swarm, and it'll be the person I'm talking to says, "You're the 5th beekeeper I've called, and I'm hoping that someone will come get these bees." It's September, so no one else wants to come get them. Why not? If this is a swarm of bees, isn't our purpose to save the bees? So what I would do personally is, if it's late in the year, pluck the queen out of them, give them a couple days to get reoriented, and combine them with another hive. That way your numbers go up in another hive, and you're also saving some bees. Save the bees. Feed. If you decide that the swarm's large enough, or it's like, late end of August, feed the bees, see if they can build up enough comb, or you could even take honey off of another hive if they have excess and give it to that hive. Because if you think your bees are going to die in the end, you might as well try. If they're going to die, you might as well try to get them to make it through the year. How do you catch a swarm? A lot of people will call and say, I have some bees and I really want to start getting into beekeeping, so what do I do to catch a swarm? The first thing to know is that swarms are very gentle. They actually have just engorged on a bunch of honeys because they're getting ready to build a nest as soon as possible. So you don't have to actually be fearful of them. We have several pictures, and I didn't put them in, but of my husband or I holding a swarm with no bee suit on. Now, it's something that I wouldn't recommend doing immediately or on your first or second swarm call. It's something that you have to learn when you get up to the bees and how they act and their behavior. The easiest way, absolutely 100%, the swarm is going to go wherever the queen is. So if you were to walk up to the swarm and you see the queen in there, if you were to just pull her out, put her in a queen cage, stick her in a box, all the bees would go. That's it. You don't have to knock bees, you don't have to shake bees, you don't have to do anything. Now that process usually takes a little bit longer because the bees have to follow the pheromone of the queen and then move in. So that's something that if you have the access to do so, go in, take your queen out, put her in a cage, prop the hive up there, come back later in the evening at dusk, take your box, and go home. That is absolutely the ultimate, easiest way to do it. That doesn't always happen. the best situation is to leave the swarm in the location that you found them, in their box, and come back at dusk, because all of the scouts will have returned for the day, but a lot of times it isn't possible. So do know that when you cut a swarm or remove a swarm and take it away, some of the scouts, about a few hundred, are going to be returning to that spot, and they're going to hang on to that branch and wait out for that queen to return until they can find her. So if you get a swarm call, you go out, you cut the bees down, you take them home, bees are in your backyard, but the person calls you a few days later and they say, there's a cluster of bees still out there. The only thing you could go back out and cut it again, but it's not another cluster typically, it's just the remaining scout bees that are trying to find their original swarm. I'm not sure, I know I've told a lot of people, but if you decide that you want, in the end, you're going to have 2 hives, have an extra hive. You just never know. Somebody down the street's going to call you and say, I have a swarm, or you're going to open your hive and you're going to find out you have swarm cells. Something like that's going to happen eventually, and if you have the equipment sitting there ready to go, then you don't have to worry about trying to call Mike and Laura up at 8 o'clock at night and ask them to open up their shed so you can get some equipment. Not that I've done that several times, but mainly, if you see a swarm, I'm going to show you some pictures and kind of at the end and kind of explain to you how the process would be. But if the bees are hanging from a branch and it's easy accessible, don't shake them. Just cut the branch, stick it in the hive. Way easier, you can get out of there a lot sooner. If you shake the bees, then you have bees flying everywhere, and you have to see if the queen laying in the box. If she didn't, the bees will go back up, and you have to do it again. You know, the whole process is can take a couple hours sometimes, depending on if the bees are following your orders or not. So the other, like I said, shake the bees in the box, or if you can, if it's within hand reach, scoop your bees up and put them in. If you do it gently, then you don't have as many bees flying around in the air and waiting for them to lay in. Well, I'll go back to this inspection slide. The inspection is because they asked me to kind of go over doing inspections for the county. But, hold on, we're going to get to some pictures. So I know the first thing that you see here is my husband is in a bee suit and my kid's not, right? The bees were actually, he did have a suit on. The bees were super, super calm and nice. So my son had just took the suit off to walk back over and grab something. But what I'm showing you is my handy dandy little PVC pipe and my bottle jug. This is the best way to catch a swarm that is too high up in the air. I don't remember, is the pole 8 feet or 10 feet? 10 feet? Okay, so it's like a 10-foot, and then you take a water jug, cut the top off of it. Well, we duct taped it to the bottom, and now you have 10 feet of an extension that you can go underneath your swarm, smack it into the box, and then dump it down into your hive. Just so you know, I think it cost us, I don't know, less than $10 to make that. What then happened was I got a bunch of calls for my hive, or my swarm is 20 feet up in the air, so I ended up ordering a 30-foot painter's extension pole. So now we can actually get hives that are up to 30 feet. So this would be something like that situation. You see this giant cluster of bees. If you take that bucket and you put it underneath here, slide it right up over the bees, smack the branch, the bees fall in the bucket, bring it down as fast as you can and dump it into the hive. This is a hive, or a swarm, I'm sorry. This was actually like the best swarm in the world. One, it was huge. And two, this fell off the ground. That never happens. So we literally put the hive underneath it and just bounced the branch. The bees fell in. We left it there till dusk, came back and got it. And yeah, it's pretty awesome. Now, one thing that I will say is, in this situation, it's okay to shake the branches when you couldn't really cut it off, obviously. But the yellow brushes, bees hate that. You will get stoned real quick, like if you're brushing those bees. So I would do everything you can to avoid using one. It is necessary in certain situations, but that is one way to really make your bees mad very quickly. And if you do use it, tell whoever is there in the vicinity watching you, because I'll tell you what, people show up real quick when they see you're putting 10,000 bees in a box. Tell them to step back, because you don't want any bees to become aggressive. Not that they would, but you just always want to remain cautious. So on the left, I think that my husband ended up having to use the yellow brush, but he put the hive down here at the bottom, and the bees literally just marched right down the tree, right into the box. And then over here to the right is a hive, or a swarm, I keep saying that. fly, so she decided to walk right out of the hive, and that's where I found them, or where they were found. And I just sat there long enough to find the queen, plucked her out of the swarm, stuck her in the hive, and all the bees marched in. So I thought that you guys might be interested in knowing what a cutout looks like, because not everybody has seen a cutout. This is actually about 5 feet long, and it is an overhead porch. And it was a very, very large hive. I believe we got 80 pounds of honey out of that. It was anyone from Highland Square? That's where it was at, up in Dorchester. This is another hive, another cutout. This is in the wall on Brown Street. And this actually extended from below the baseboard all the way up to the ceiling. And then this is another one that was 12 pounds of bees approximately. We split that into 3 different hives. What had happened was the bees were getting ready to swarm, and so they had overcrowded. It was probably July, and we happened to be very lucky and catch them right before they swarmed. So we had a queen and several queen cells to be able to split them in multiple. And the funny thing is that actually by the time we had gotten out to this appointment to do this cutout, bees had actually moved into the other side of the guy's house too. So
how do you keep them as an inside cutout?
an inside cutout?
That's what it looks like.
Yes. Yep. That happens.
You're either in their living room, bedroom, wherever you cut that out of that wall.
Yep.
How do you keep them from flying through the house just close to the living room?
Usually once you have the hive open, the bees are going to stay where they're at because they're not really used to having the open exposure, so they don't typically fly out. But what we do to eradicate that is open a window, and they will fly to the light. So if you keep the lights off, they're going to fly to the window, go out to the window, and come back into the hive, and it just goes around.
That swarm in that wall, it looks like a little walnut tree right there. Did you take the queen out and put her in a box and then they went down?
Yep.
Okay, now, I'm looking at that. We have, what, 15, 20,000 bees there at least?
That one was a smaller swarm, probably about 5,000 to 7,000.
Okay, now my question is the queen usually in the geographical center? Is she usually right in the middle?
Usually, yes. Usually. Now, what I didn't show here, though, is if you've ever walked up to a swarm and you'll have a swarm here and a swarm here, but they're connected, she's going to be in either one of those. You get to take your pick.
You're actually taking you're actually parting them and looking for the queen. She's not on the outside, she's on the inside, right?
She's typically going to be in the center, but she does walk around. There have been times where my husband was able to plug her off the outside.
Okay.
But what I typically do is I scoop bees, put them in the box until I find her.
Yeah.
And if I don't find her and they all start moving in the box, then I know she's in there.
Then you know she's in.
Yeah. Now, you don't want to leave your, okay, so if you have an empty box, like a cardboard box, you can use anything.
Right, right.
It doesn't really matter. You can, a bucket.
There again, you're waiting, once you put her in there and they're starting to come in, you're waiting until dark to come back to get them, correct?
Depending on the situation. There have been, like we did a Google down in downtown Canton, and they wanted the bees gone now. So we had to, do what we could to get them out. There are situations where they want them gone, and personally, I would rather just do one trip. I kind of want the bees, and then I want to get out of there. I don't want to come back. Unless it's somewhere close to my neighborhood, then I will. But anyway, what I was saying is that if you can put your bees in anything, just don't leave them in there. Because by the time, if you put them in a bucket, one, they have no ventilation or circulation. So you have to leave the bucket open. By the time you wake up in the morning, the bees will be gone. They typically don't swarm in the evening. They will only swarm around 10 o'clock in the morning. It seems to be pretty average. So if you want to make sure, you put your bees in a cardboard box and you put them in equipment, try to get those bees in your new equipment by 8 in the morning if you can.
Do you ever use pheromones?
No.
Artificial pheromones?
So I know Scott Derrick with Honeybee Gone, right? Is that what it's called? And he has swarm alarms.
Yeah.
And he has sent them to me, and I have them somewhere in my garage. So one day I'm going to get them out and I'm going to put them in there. I haven't yet. But I have put lemongrass oil in a swarm box before. I was not successful. The only one time I used it, I used too much and the bees left. So then I don't use it. I also don't have time to do swarm boxes, even though every year I try to get that going and it just never happens. But if you know that, someone says, hey, there was a swarm down the street at so-and-so's house, go down to so-and-so's house and say, hey, can I put up this preventative honeybee swarm box? I put it up in your tree, and the bees will go to this if they're going to come back again, and you don't have to worry about the bees, and I get free bees. once your hive has decided that they want to swarm, you have to pull that queen out. Some beekeepers might argue with me about that, but what I've experienced is that the queen has decided she wants to leave, so until she feels like she is left, she's going to keep wanting to swarm. You're also going to make sure that you leave your eggs in the original hive, not all of them, but they have to be able to make new queen, so make sure that there are eggs in there. If you're taking the original queen out and you're putting brood in your new hive, you're going to make sure that you have eggs in there so that your queen can develop. You also say, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of a walk-away split, but basically you have, if you do the regular 2 deeps, you just take the top deep off and the bottom deep off, stick them on a bottom board, and give them tops and wait it out and see what happens. You have to do that before the queen has decided that they're going to swarm, because if not, she might still, like I said, she might still create swarms if she's left in that original hive with the pheromones going, saying that they want to swarm. So, but if you are splitting them, you're going through, try to split it evenly, but you want to give the capped brood more to your new hive. And the reason for that is because the bees that are out foraging are going to want to return to their hive. So you need new bees hatching out so that they're able to go out and forage for their own hive as well. Like I said, the walk-away split has to be done prior to swarm season, and before swarm season starts. When people start finding out you're a beekeeper, they're going to give you a call and they're going to say, hey, I have bees, do you want to come catch them? YouTube it. Spend a couple hours on YouTube, watch some videos, see what people do. There are different methods. There are people that say you have to have a white sheet. They'll put the white sheet down because when they shake the branch, they want to be able to point out the queen, and then they pluck her and stick her in the hive, and that's why. The other thing, people, when we first started doing it, I was told to use sugar water. So I used sugar water. I was told that it will calm the bees down. There's really no difference. It doesn't matter. If it's a case of like a starvation situation where the bees have been there for several days and they are acting aggressive, if a swarm is acting aggressive, something has happened to them. Remember that. If they are being aggressive, something's going on. They were either sprayed, they're starving, or somebody has been messing with them. So in that situation, I would probably use sugar water to help feed them and calm them down in that scenario. But typically, we don't actually use anything other than cans and boxes. So, does anyone have any questions about that?
You mentioned a term I have not heard before, checkerboarding. And the other thing I was, some may not know the difference between swarm cells and supersedure cells.
Good question. So checkerboarding is, I don't know the whole thing, so I'm going to give you the rundown of what I was reading from Michael Bush, but that 2 weeks before swarm season begins, you put empty brood frames up above the brood chamber so that the bees don't feel like they're confined and they have space to move up. Does that make sense? So like if you have your deep, you're just putting another deep on with frames that have already been built out so that the queen can move up. Double check that, but I believe that was what it was. And then what was your second question?
Just to explain the difference between swarm cells and supersedure cells.
Okay, so around 3 years, the hive typically says, okay, this queen's old, so we're going to supersede her, and that just means we're going to either kill off the old queen, kick her out of the hive, or her pheromones are so weak we will allow her to stay in the hive, which doesn't happen very often, and create a new queen. So when you're looking at your supersedure cells, well, your swarm cells are typically going to be in the bottom, or towards the bottom and really clustered, like not hundreds, but many, like 15 to 20 of them in one area. Those are going to be your swarm cells at the bottom. If you are seeing swarm cells sporadic throughout the frame, those are most likely your supersedure cells. If you are new to beekeeping, call a mentor to have them come out and look and check for you so that you know what you're dealing with. A lot of times last year when I would go out to do inspections, they would say, oh, my queen is marked, but they didn't have a marked queen. And most likely what had happened was they had some supersedure cells in there. They didn't like the queen that the package came with, so they killed that queen and they made themselves a new one. So